then we'll have a look at the tourism industry recovery in China. As we have mentioned in previous webinars, China is leading the recovery for this tourism recovery because everything calmed down in China except this Beijing outbreak again. So this whole industry has been kind of trying to get back on the normal track, even from March to April. And then from the May Day holiday in China, there's a little bit peak season for a lot of domestic travelers. Nowadays, you can wave to the giant Mickey Mouse mascot in the Shanghai Disneyland, but you can't stay too close enough for a selfie. And also another case is that in the Forbidden City in Beijing, they can only take 5,000 visitors a day, just 60% of this normal cap. But that kind of reopening is also months or weeks ahead of other parts of the world. I know Europe is somehow trying to or gradually opening again, but there are some patterns and some references from the Chinese market that might be as a reference to see how this reopening might look like in the other markets. And as written by the economics, that China is leading the way out of the travel lockdowns, but still largely within its own borders. There's no international traveling at this very moment. Over the Labor Day weekend at the start of May, some 115 million Chinese went on domestic holidays. It's a healthy 60% of last year's number. Capacity on Chinese domestic flights was down by only 10% year on year in the first week of May. But foreign flights are still rare. In the very recent approval by the Aviation Authority of China, some international airlines, including Air France and Air New Zealand, are allowed to fly back to Shanghai again. So we'll be seeing more international flights coming to China in the upcoming weeks and months, but probably not in Beijing, as I was just mentioning about the second wave of the outbreak. As you can see the numbers, when the outbreak started in January, there's a huge dive that tourism services, apps like Ctrip, Fliggy, Mafengwo, and Qunar, there's a peak when people are trying to canceling a lot of tickets for returns and refunds. But basically after that, there's no activities. People are not traveling at all when the outbreak first started in China. And then some other travel services apps like Maps, Trains, Didi, they all are, having a not enough businesses for months, basically because people are in quarantine and staying at home with social distancing, and not many people are traveling at all. Following with that, quite some Chinese travel businesses are bankrupt or shut down because of this because of this really bizarre situation. As some of you might have heard a company called Baicheng. It's a 20-year-old company that provides airplane tickets, hotel bookings, and visa processing services, started from the year 2000. But this Beijing-based company, Baicheng, and also backed up by Chinese internet giant Alibaba, it's an investor, announced a bankrupt in February. That is just one bigger company that got the media attention, but there's a lot of other trade professionals, tourism, tour operator companies, and also tour guides who lost their job and still are not able to get back to the business until today. Luckily, China has the passengers return some weeks or has ahead. As you can see, from late January to February, basically not much people are traveling. And then gradually, including the May Day holiday and the first week of May and until today, the numbers are going back. And this is about the domestic flights passengers of the daily numbers you show in the charts here. The figures are a sign of hope that the industry has been struggling to maintain cash flow after coming off an all-time low of about 133K daily passengers in early February. But now it might be million already, depending on the weekdays or the weekends. Yeah, so there are two tracks to follow. One is more B2C, as one case that Visit Finland has launched this Rent a Thing goes virtual cases that, for a B2B track, this is from Alaska DMO, that they are provide online training for the trade professionals in China. So during this recovery or containment phase, there are two tracks that the communications should happen. One is for the tourists, for the consumers directly. The other ones is that for all those trade professionals in China and tour operators in China, they're also laid off at home without much to do, basically. And they also need to get trainings and get information about the destination in order to get prepared for the upcoming recovery. Another thing is that this 1 year time or even longer that people are not allowed to travel to some destinations, this is an important way to keep people stay posted, so that people will not forget about this destination. And once that they come, that people can start to traveling again, they will be reminded that, okay, I remember Finland or remember Alaska. That will bring more sales. Another thing for the business recovery is that you see a digitalization process that has never seen under coronavirus. Here are just some examples of how the travel businesses in China are using anything possible, any technologies and digital tools to help with the containment and the safety and hygiene of traveling. For example, the body temperature scan, that kind of is essential for everywhere, every public spots in China. Another thing is health QR code clearance. We might have to think about that after coronavirus. Nowadays, we use visa and passports for 100 years. Maybe the next stage is that we'll also need a global health QR code for all the countries. Once you enter that, you'll see, okay, I've been tested in China. What is the time? Is it positive, negative? Am I QR code green or yellow or red? This kind of technologies might need collaborations from all governments around the world. And for international traveling, this kind of QR code is super important. It is a reference from China, since a lot of Chinese provinces are pretty huge, and when you travel to another province or another big city, you have to show the QR code to prove that you are healthy, you're okay to travel. So this kind of digitalized code clearance might also be used on international traveling later on, just for safety and hygiene. Another thing that has been discussed in China for quite some years, even before coronavirus, is that how to get digitalized and these tools to help people's check-in, check-out, room service and everything. There are robots that can deliver dishes to your room door, and there are self check-in and face recognition without any cashier or any front desk employees help. That means that you don't have to talk to any people. Just by yourself, you can finish all the check-in process. So this is the process that we have been look at, even now after coronavirus, that this might be something that is going to be used globally. Another thing very important for all businesses is a sales activation. We need the cash flow back as much as possible. And believe me, Chinese OTAs and Chinese tour operators and this industry has been trying everything possible to have it back. This is a case from C-Trip. They are having this top management level CEOs, CFOs, and all these top management people cosplaying in live stream. that they are trying to encourage more tourists to buy their things. And it helps. In this one session that this C-Trip chairman Liang Jianzhang was promoting, there are millions of dollars of sales overnight. And also some other DMOs, for example, Sri Lanka are having this news that they are planning for something pretty long term. They're going to invest money starting from next year for $1 million global tourism promotion campaign. And we can see this kind of global tourism promotion campaign being planned for a lot of destinations right now, aiming for the post-coronavirus recovery. And also for Chinese travel businesses, tomorrow is an important day as it's the mid-year shopping festival. So a lot of businesses are kind of, giving a lot of discounts and coupons and sales campaigns online just to make people to make the reservation in advance, because people need the cash flow back. For example, I might be able to buy some hotel vouchers, valid for 1 year long. It's quite cheap, and it is mostly because of the tourist confidence of traveling. I believe I can travel there for 1 year long, so people are willing to bring those cash flow to the business already now. So when we talk about the new normal after coronavirus, that is a new historic stage we are facing now. There's a key question is that when will Chinese outbound tourists travel again? There are several things I would like to share with you guys. Is that many people are thinking about, for example, FIT travelers will come earlier than the group travelers, and then business travelers will come earlier than the other travelers. But I think the situations might be a little bit more complicated than people think about when you put it on the Chinese concepts. One thing is that the government policy for public health, aviation flights, and immigration, so basically these borders closed or open, are going to be really important. At this very moment, Chinese borders are still closed for foreigners. So foreigners are not allowed to enter China. But I have to say, not many Chinese are leaving China as well. China is kind of its own bubble that is safe and hygiene, that people feel like all the outside world is not 100% safe. Let's say now that Chinese people are even allowed to travel to some destinations. For example, Greece, they have the new policy that they are welcoming Chinese tourists. But the thing is, policy is one thing. Another thing is that Chinese tourists' confidence on that destination is not high enough, including the confidence of traveling safely on flights and airports. That meaning that even the policy is loosened, depending on the coronavirus containment of the destination, and in between, like the transfer airports, the tourists will still not be able to travel. And government policies regarding these issues plays a very important part on how the international tourists will go back to the normal flow. Another thing people should remember is that there are a large number of Chinese immigrants and heritages living outside China, everywhere in the world. So they might be having the local citizenship or not, but they are living outside China for long term. These could be the Chinese travelers that is part of the domestic plan that the local business recovery. Take Finland as example. It has more than 10K Chinese living there, including the students. It might be less at this very moment, but remember that those people are also using the Chinese channels and receiving information in Chinese. So they are Chinese travelers. They're just not traveling from China mainland. But those people might also be part of the recovery plan that they can travel easily. The third thing to notice is the traveler with special needs. For now, it is June. Still a large number of Chinese students living in all parts of the world are trying to escape the world and get back to home in China. And that's why the flights are limited but so expensive, because a lot of Chinese immigrants, students, workers are still on the direction that they are rushing back to China and can't even buy a flight ticket. But remember that starting from September and October, some Chinese students, depending on the university policy and on the destination, might need to travel again to the destination to start their new semester because they have paid the tuition fees and they might not want to have online courses again back home in China. Is making no sense when you want to have an overseas degree. But those students might be something that they will need to buy aviation services, including airports and flights. And they might be the things that some people are trying to get back to China, but those people with special needs will need to get out of China. So those are the ones with really special needs, but will pay a lot of money on aviations, even on hotel quarantines, but it's a special case. For business travelers, this case is also special in China because China have a lot of state-run businesses. These state-run businesses, including government business trip or state-run corporates, and also a lot of universities and schools, which they travel a lot globally, they're also state-run. These organizations, if they want to send anyone for business trips outside China, they will have to wait for a local government or a central government policy that it is allowed. Otherwise, without that policy, without that paper, all those state-run businesses, schools, organizations will not be allowed to travel at all. Another thing is China have a lot of big corporates, both privately owned and international corporates. Those corporates normally act really fast on issuing traveling alert. So they are also kind of following local policies and global policies regarding traveling. And it's very likely that the bigger they get, the more cautious they are issuing the notice to their employees that you should not travel that much to any destinations just for safety and health. Another thing is that China also have a lot of SME. Me, myself, is an SME business traveler. I used to travel to Finland and the Nordics and Europe basically once in every 2 months at least, sometimes once a month. I was planning to travel to Finland in February, but personally speaking, to be honest, I don't see myself traveling outside China in the whole year of 2020. Because the whole situation is not that optimistic at this very moment. Regarding FIT travelers and group travelers, the first 3 segments we're talking about, they are not leisure travelers. They are for studying, they're for business or special needs. But the FIT travelers or group travelers in China are pretty much leisure travelers. They're for fun, they're for holidays and vacations. Regarding this stage, personally thinking that group travelers are highly controlled and tightened also by the government policy. So in case the central government of China are not issuing a global policy loose that group traveling sales is able to sell again, otherwise group products will not be able to be put on the market. But it doesn't mean that these travel agencies and tour operators in China are not buying. They might make the bookings already now because they might feel the policy from the government might be out, for example, next January, but they will make the planning and make the pre-bookings already now maybe. So group travelers will come later than FIT travelers for sure, but the group traveling sales to the Chinese tour operators and travel agencies might have happening earlier. For the FIT travelers, I think it's pretty much depending on the traveling safety, on the pricing, on the destinations, and on the new trends. If we look at this new normal, I would just mentioning, at least in the domestic travel market in China, more and more people are actually willing to travel by their own cars instead of public transportations. And a lot of people have showed interest on family bonding, on small groups, on the destinations that without a big crowd, that they can have clean air and the fresh water, and they can basically enjoy the destination not in a traditional crowded way. So that kind of destinations and services and products might be popular for some segments of the Chinese tourists in the new normal stage. And for FIT travelers, it has been mentioning for many destinations and DMOs for years, saying that that is the trend. They're going to be increasing, but still, before coronavirus, group traveling sales is an important part for many destinations for a very long time. But I guess after coronavirus, the FIT travelers will increase a lot more, depending on how they buy the products and how they travel. So yeah, that is the booking time and traveling time difference. Bear in mind that the marketing stage, the sales stage, and the traveling stage to Chinese tourists is quite different, and there's a gap in between the three stages I was just mentioning.